Lend me your ears.
This nation will rise up.
Welcome to the Elemental Health Podcast. Today's episode is another corker and a great conversation with one of the most humble guys I've had on the show to date, for sure. But he's got an incredible track record. We are going to jump straight in with Yousuf Nabi. And he's got so many accolades, I just don't know where to start. He ranks number one overall black belt athlete 2017 in the UK, 4 times British Open gold medalist, Polaris Pro veteran, Checkmat team rep. It goes on and on and on. This guy falls over himself to compete all the time and compete at the top level, and he constantly comes away with medals and more often than not the golds. It's phenomenal that the kind of the intensity and the level that he's at and consistency that he applies to his training and to his art. This is a sport that I'm brand new to and just starting to dip my toe into, and I think what's great about this interview, it kind of pulls out, or we certainly attempt to pull out the lessons that can transpose into all areas of life from Jujitsu, and it's amazing how many synergies there are to all the other aspects that I'm always talking about and some of my other guests are talking about in terms of mindfulness. And it's really the psychology of the sport that attracted me to it and that I just continue to find fascinating. And it also synergizes with my true belief around the learning mind. And we touch on that as well. So without further ado, guys, let's jump in. Yousuf, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the Elemental Health Podcast. Really been looking forward to getting you on the show and having a chat about everything, and as the audience has already found out in the introduction, so we met through your Jiu-Jitsu school, which I'm now a member of, and desperately trying to sort of find my way in that environment, which is completely new to me. So I've never done any sort of groundwork, grappling or anything like that, and absolutely loving it, and something that I'm sure we'll get onto because I think it's really interesting, and I want to get your viewpoint is that beginner mindset, and that's what I'm really enjoying, is being that sort of. I've heard expression actually which fits perfectly with Jiu-Jitsu is the white belt mentality, always wanting to learn and always wanting to try new things. So for me, I'm really enjoying that experience in the incredible environment that you've created down at Elements. So welcome, and we'll dive straight into your story really, and how you found Jiu-Jitsu and how you got to the dizzy heights that you're at now. Because every time I jump on social media, you're winning another comp, or you're running a comp, and it's phenomenal. So it's great to see, now I know you, to see that come up on my social media and try and understand. I'd like to try and understand kind of, how you've got to the level you're at, and how you keep that consistency in your training, and how you find the competition stage as well, and navigate that, because it certainly seems to me, as a kind of an outsider, is that you're doing a lot of competitions and you're being really successful. So I know my audience would love to unpick that, so we'll get to that, but maybe just start with kind of a kind of roundup how you got into Jiu-Jitsu, and then how you kind of created, how you got through the ranks and created the Elements Gym, Elements Martial Arts.
All right, first of all, thanks for having me on. So kind of like stumbled upon it many years ago. A very similar story from what I've been told by other people around the same kind of time. Exposed to the UFC, very early UFCs, and Hoist Gracie. So for those of you who aren't aware of Hoist Gracie, he's one of the pioneers of mixed martial arts. Watched a grainy video of him with one of my cousins, and immediately was in awe of this skinny guy who was able to kind of like completely control guys who you would expect to completely dominate him. So using groundwork, and that was kind of like when I was roughly about 12, 13, but it always stayed in the back of my mind. I was always interested in martial arts, but I never really I wasn't really the sporty type. and had 2 left feet, couldn't play football, couldn't really kind of get into the groove of any school activity, sport activities or anything like that. But later on realised that I needed to do something physical. This was when I was probably early 20s, 21, 22. Tried a few things out, joined the gym for a bit, hated everything. Couldn't stand any of it. Didn't like running on a treadmill. Probably something completely different to what your viewers are like. But yeah, I wasn't the sporty type at all. But yeah, I kind of I remember these grainy videos, and I thought, well, look, let me just try it. I like the look of it. Thought, well, look, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Went to my first class. Which was at the time in Peacehaven, and the first class I went to, my one of the guys who I was training with managed to dislocate his shoulder. Called the ambulance, took him away, and I thought, I cannot do this. I can't afford to get injured because of my work at the time, and didn't do it for another 3 months. Had a chat with somebody, and they kind of persuaded me to try Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So that was mixed martial arts. So there was a mixed martial arts school over in Peacehaven at the time, run by a guy called Sol Gilbert, which a lot of the local Brighton community would know. He used to run a club called ZT Fight School, and now is a part of the Underground gym.
Okay.
So he's one of the main guys at the Underground. And yeah, so somebody persuaded me to try Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I didn't even know that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was what Hoist Gracie was doing at the time. But I went to this class, and I tell you what made me stick to it. It was the first time somebody paid a compliment to what I was doing. And it kind of it really stuck in my head, and it really felt like, oh, maybe I can actually be half competent at something. Yeah, immediately fell in love with it and thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah,
cool. And this was back when sort of BJJ hadn't landed as such. I mean, now we've seen a massive explosion, aren't we, of kind of people getting into it. People like myself, I've just turned 40, I'm getting into it, and yeah, so this was kind of before it was so mainstream. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. So around that time, it was even difficult to explain to people what we did. Yeah. We'd have to kind of link it to judo, or wrestling, and then people make the mistake of thinking we were doing professional, pro, WWF style wrestling. so yeah, it was difficult. A lot easier to explain to people nowadays. There's so many celebrities, there's so many people. It really is in the forefront of martial arts and sports in general. Everybody seems to know about it nowadays.
Yeah. Cool. So that was your kind of your you getting into it, and I think it's really interesting that you weren't that sporty, but you're attracted to jiu-jitsu, and then you pursued it as well. So, and I think I disagree with what you said. I think there's lots of people out there, certainly a lot of the guys that I coach and train, they and I think there's a problem with how some sports and fitness is promoted through the education system and to adults as well. And people are sort of shying away, and we had a bit of a chat sort of off air about kind of some of the problems. And yeah, I think there are a lot of people out there that don't like the conventional way of doing things and don't really fit into the mold. Maybe didn't do loads of sports at school, and it sounds that was similar to you really, and you were looking for something else, and then you kind of happened upon this. So that's really interesting, and I think there's a connection there with lots of people.
I think a lot of people are made to feel quite uncomfortable as well within certain sporting kind of situations, club sports. Not so much in adulthood, but I think it's still around there. I mean, it's even in the case of kind of walking into a lot of gyms and feeling a little bit intimidated by other gym members, and I think there is kind of that mentality within all different sporting situations.
I think for sure the competitiveness has got a real there's a real detriment to that way of doing things. And I think, I couldn't agree more. And that's part of my mission, is to try and get people engaged more in their health and finding their own way to health and fitness. And I think, and that is exactly linked to kind of the stuff that you're talking about and you're doing, because it attracts people that wouldn't necessarily go to a gym, but they're still doing great sort of movement, and they're still kind of getting active and having and promoting a healthy life. So that's why I wanted you on the show, really, because there are huge synergies, and it's a completely different way. And like you say, it attracts different type of people. And I noticed that as soon as I came into your gym. I didn't like to call it a gym. What do you call it?
We call it a gym.
We call it a gym, but it doesn't feel like a
I know what you mean.
And it attracts a really eclectic mix. Probably the only word I can use is of people, and people that perhaps wouldn't go to gym, like a classic gym, or go and work, quote unquote, work out or anything like that. So it's great from that perspective.
I was really mindful of that as well. Like when we were trying to develop the gym, and we needed to make it as inclusive as possible, not only from a business perspective, but also for the fact that we wanted to make sure that everybody had a chance to experience what we had to offer. We try and keep a competitive element to the gym. We have a lot of people who do compete and are quite successful, but we also have people from situations where, like you say, would not normally kind of like participate in a sport like this, just for the fact that we try and open it up to everybody. We try and make sure that everybody is welcome and feel like everybody is able to train.
And that goes back to, and that's very obvious when you step foot in your establishment, and that's credit to you, credit to your team as well. And that brings me on to a question I had around kind of the logo and your sort of tagline as well. So who thought that up, and if you want to explain that process as well, because I think that's exactly what you're talking about.
So that the big flag that we've got at the gym, "We Are All One," that comes from a well-known mixed martial artist in the name of Genki Sudo, and he used to hold that flag up after he'd won a fight, and I think it really helped to kind of like it just ended up like gluing into the whole ethos of the gym. And it's funny, really. It was like it kind of started off as a t-shirt design, and we were trying to think of a cool t-shirt design to have something that we can incorporate our own logo to, and have some kind of tagline that would kind of like help kind of create the ethos of the gym. And then we just kind of like that came up, and we ran with it, and it helped to fit in really well with what we wanted to achieve. So
I think it's brilliant, and it's that clear messaging, and it gives it incorporates exactly what you're talking about. For sure, brilliant. And before we dive in kind of the nitty-gritty of jiu-jitsu and how that can incorporate loads of aspects of health and movement.
Sure.
I'm just intrigued the story that you were talking about. So you're sort of rise through the ranks and then creating your own and starting instructing. So you were saying that you got into that relatively early, and you were sort of thrown in at the deep end. And I just wanted to kind of go through that and just to touch on how you became an instructor effectively, and how you sort of pursued it beyond what I think most people would or do. They sort of get to a certain level and it becomes a bit more of a hobby, but then you kind of went all the way. I think that's a lot to do with my kind of like obsessive nature, but and like I say, a lot of the time that wouldn't have kind of like directed towards sports, but I just stumbled through jiu-jitsu, so when I started training jiu-jitsu, there was like probably less than a dozen of us training at the time, and my instructor, like after a couple of years of teaching us, decided to move back to Brazil. So he was a brown belt at the time, so quite very experienced compared to the level of jiu-jitsu in the UK. So at the time there was no black belts in the UK, so that just goes to show how kind of like young the sport is. So he moved back, and
myself and one of my friends who's also teaching at the gym now, Kim. We were kind of like relatively new students. We just got our first grade, which is a blue belt, and we were kind of left in the lurch, and we had to kind of figure out whether we should carry on doing this or not. And we both loved doing it, so we thought, well, we'll take it upon ourselves to start teaching, even though we had no idea what to teach. But yeah, it was a massive learning curve, and as we spoke about already, it's something that I really thrive in. I love to kind of like just do things completely randomly and and unplanned, and the whole kind of like jiu-jitsu journey for me has been pretty much that. It's like literally winging it all the way through, but finding my way through. Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah.
That's I mean, I think there's a lot to be said for that approach. There really is. I think there's so many people out there, and we're so measured in what we do, and we're looking for the next course or the next ticket or next qualification to get us to where we want to go. But sometimes, the best approach is just to jump in and kind of, almost sink or swim, baptism of fire, whatever the cliche is. But I think it works. I
mean, I've never been a perfectionist. I don't really understand the whole kind of perfectionism thing. Like for me personally, I believe if you really love doing what you're doing, eventually you'll get to be as good as you want to be. You know what I mean? And and constantly thriving to move on to the next step is something that kind of helps me to develop as a person as well. So yeah.
Well, that's I couldn't agree more. It's that it's constantly wanting to grow and develop, isn't it? That actually it's embracing the journey as opposed to kind of the outcome. And I think it's so easy to get outcome orientated and think, well, I just want to get to this next step. Or that's kind of almost an antithesis to where you are now, the journey moving forward. And that translates to every aspect of life, really, doesn't it?
Goals are important, but they've got to be incremental, and you've got to be able to know that it's achievable as well. Otherwise, if you're looking at the end goal, then it's so far ahead that that it's hard to kind of plan for it. For me personally anyway. I think I mean you've now got a wealth of experience in coaching, instructing, and I dare say beyond that, I don't know if you scratch the surface, I'm sure you have in your own mind around helping people to develop. There's so many layers to that process, and understanding where people are and where they want to move through and to, that goes beyond jiu-jitsu, beyond kind of what you're doing on the surface of it, for sure. I think we spend our life in process. So if you're not, if you're constantly thinking about what's at the end of the process, you're probably not going to enjoy that process, and therefore you're not getting the most out of your life, really. You're not, and it's always worth thinking about. Totally,
I think.
It's like you already mentioned, like being a white belt and how refreshing it is. I mean, jiu-jitsu is like that for me personally. Jiu-jitsu is like that all the way through. Even at black belt, you're constantly a white belt. You're constantly learning new things. You're constantly developing. And again, it's a bit cliche, but that is what it is. It really is.
Yes, and that's. We have these conversations, and the cliches always come out, and the edicts, but they're there for a reason, I think, and it's just it is what it is. It really is. So moving forward, then, so how did you get into the, because I know people are I'm certainly interested in the kind of competition side of things and how that progressed. And obviously you were around in the early days when there was no black belts. I wasn't aware of that. There's no black belts in the UK, which is fascinating given where we are now.
No UK based black belts. So there's a few Brazilians that are around in the bigger cities, but no UK based black belts.
Interesting. So how and when and what was the process for you going through to kind of standard competition level and taking part?
So I always knew it was important to be able to test yourself, and obviously we test ourselves on a daily basis at the gym, but there's nothing different to actually going out there and competing against somebody you don't know, somebody who actually wants to kick your ass as well. So it was always something that I was interested in, and I kind of pushed like my colleagues quite early on, to come to competitions with me. To varying success. Some did, some didn't. Some came to a couple of comps and then dropped off. But I was always really interested in competition, and I actually, like, weirdly, even though I was quite fearful of it, I actually quite enjoyed the fear as well, overcoming that fear, and I think the time when I really started picking up with competition was when we were teaching. So myself and my former business partner were both teaching full time at the academy, and I wanted to try and motivate the students. I wanted to try and motivate the guys to actually come to competition. I thought, well, if I'm going to try and motivate them to compete, I need to try and compete myself.
Yeah.
And again, even though I was quite fearful of competing, I knew that I had to go out there and do it, and not only do it, but do well at it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I couldn't expect them to.
Yeah.
And that was my main motivation to compete quite early on, and eventually that kind of like started to move into other areas, but yeah, that was my main first focus. Yeah.
And you obviously found a passion for it as well.
Yeah, definitely. I still poo my pants whenever I compete, but yeah, like there is still that fear, but 100%, I still love it. I love winning, medals. I love winning competitions. I also love losing as well, because losing allows you to come back to the gym and work harder for to achieve the next win. So
yeah. Wow. Yeah, so it's always interesting because you it sounds like you kind of put yourself in a position where you had to compete to try and help others to go and hit that platform.
Again, it's throwing yourself in at the deep end, and and winging it, winging it through, and saying, well, look, maybe if I do this, then this will help them to do better, and like I say, it was always about me growing the club and offering it to more people and allowing it to create access for other people to enjoy the art. So I just thought of this as one of those things to help to develop it.
Yeah, cool. So, yes, and now a big part of your business is the kids classes.
Yes.
So, and that's something I want to touch on, because how did that? I'm interested in how it came about, but also what you see the benefits are for kids training jiu-jitsu, and what transferable stuff is going on in that space. That you might have thought before, or you might have not thought about, and is developing.
Right. Okay. So we started teaching the kids classes quite early on, actually, prior to us moving into our full-time premises. And the main reasons for the kids classes were my own kids, actually. So they were both like 4 and 5 at the time, so daughter and son. And we had a few other students who had kids as well. So that was like the start of.
So it's organic, classes. Really,
very organic. Yeah. And to be honest, it's kind of been organic all the way through. We try not to kind of push too hard on marketing or advertising. Only very recently we've actually started to market it. So it was a slow growth as well. But it was great because it allowed us to learn from our mistakes and try and improve on it. So once we did end up getting to bigger classes, we kind of knew what we were doing, or knew more than we did before anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And what's what do you see as the benefits of, like, taking your kids to jiu-jitsu as opposed to football or anything like that? What is unique about this martial art that kids are getting benefit from? Okay,
so first of all, I think it's important that kids do what they enjoy doing. Like we try and make it as fun as possible for the kids to so they actually want to turn up again. The benefits of jiu-jitsu may not necessarily be exclusive to jiu-jitsu, but for me personally, I feel like that jiu-jitsu kind of allows kids to understand what it feels like to be in close proximity with one another. So having that connection with one another, which they tend not to have in a lot of other activities, like even other martial arts. I mean, you tend to find, without mocking any other martial art, but there isn't that kind of close connection in like a lot of striking arts. They're not actually allowed to hit each other, kids, anyway. In a lot of so a lot of it's kata. A lot of it's just movement and that kind of stuff. Whereas in jiu-jitsu, we actually get them to spar with one another every single class that they come to. So it allows them to actually understand what it feels like when somebody's actually getting into their comfort zone. Yeah.
And
so,
what sort of learning process goes on there? What have you seen in your kids and the other kids as well? Is there like a natural learning process?
100%. Yeah, I mean, it helps to build up their confidence massively. On a number of occasions, we've had parents coming in and saying, look, we don't know what to do with our child. They're really shy and they won't open up and to other kids, and they're finding it hard to make friends and whatnot. And coming to jiu-jitsu has helped them to kind of open up a bit more. So yeah, it definitely helped.
So they're overcoming those barriers, really. I can see. I don't have children, but I can see how that works 100%. Because you're forced, like you say, forced to that close proximity, and kind of it's very different to anything that I've experienced before in terms of physical contact and how humans interact. Because the social norms are very different, and you're breaking down so many different barriers, and I think there's a lot of value in that.
Definitely. I don't think that's exclusive to jiu-jitsu. I think that is like most grappling arts would have that same thing for freestyle wrestling, or any other form of wrestling, or judo as well. But I definitely think that there's something that would benefit all kids if we can try and get them in and enjoy things like this.
And you talked about children, all people, but children that are sort of shy and finding it hard to interact.
Yes.
Is there also at the other end of the spectrum?
100%. Yeah, dealing with loss. We try and there seems to be like a big problem with defining winners and losers in society nowadays for kids. We try and make sure that every child that trains with us understands the significance of losing and winning. So it helps to kind of get them to understand the difference between the two, and the fact that it's acceptable to be able to sometimes win and sometimes lose.
So that's amazing, because that's kind of counter to some of the stuff that's going on there, like 8th place medal and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Everybody's a winner and that kind of mentality, which I'm sure has its place, but I definitely think it's important that they know that there is a definition between the two, and the fact that if you do want to win, you've got to work hard to win. Not everybody gets an opportunity to win.
Well, that's it, and that's a lesson that you can't understate, really. You can't overstate, because hard work and the right mentality and the right ethos will see you good, and that's an incredible lesson for kids to learn.
Definitely,
especially in an environment, I think, where they're a physical environment where it's kind of visceral as well. I think that's really important, because I think they learn stuff at school and elsewhere at home and stuff, but some of those environments maybe can be a little bit sterile. But in the jiu-jitsu environment, everything's so physical, so visceral. You're kind of in each other's faces. It's contact.
It's hard to avoid.
It's
hard to avoid it.
And I think that those lessons are really interesting for adults as well, in terms of kind of overcoming your fears, but also overcoming kind of your ego as well. Especially kind of a boy coming into that environment like myself, and thinking that one thing, but then being sort of educated by someone that's physically very different to you, and it's not necessarily about those. It's almost the opposite to kind of playground sort of rules. Really,
totally. Like there's a saying in jiu-jitsu, and I completely disagree with it, and I think the way that you explained it was much better, actually. But they say you leave your ego at the door. I think it's hard for us to leave our ego at the door, but we need to learn how to control it and understand it better, and know that that we do have an ego, but we can actually help to kind of harness it through training and losing and winning.
Absolutely, and that's it's about learning, isn't it? It's really about learning and raising your own awareness, and I think that's the kind of that's the valuable understated benefits of specifically this, but there's lots of ways, but and other physical activities have the benefits as well. But I think jiu-jitsu is like I said, it's very kind of very obvious,
Sure.
and that those learning that learning takes place no matter who you are, no matter what level you're at, and it's kind of it's an awesome environment to sort of go through that process, because apart from everyone having to do that kind of that sort of self-awareness, self-learning process, and getting over their own ego, it's a very safe environment to do that in, because it's certainly the environment you've created where everyone's really supportive.
Sure.
And there's a real multitude of skills and experience. Sure. And there's not a situation where the more advanced away from the newer, and it's not like that. No. In fact, you encourage everyone to mix it up.
100%.
Yeah. Cool. Right, moving forward then. So you're now a black belt.
Sure.
And you compete a huge amount from what I can see, and are hugely successful. So what's turned the corner, and what pushed you through? I mean, you're an incredibly humble guy, and I'm trying to pull these answers out of you, which is lovely. But your success and your commitment to compete and commitment to excellence. What was the turning point, or what was the development to that, and what keeps you going in that vein?
So as I explained earlier, so like the motivation was at the time when I was a purple belt, and I wanted to. I'm explaining purple belt. Most people don't know what that means. So I'm kind of like halfway through my development. Purple belt is when you've really started to kind of understand the jiu-jitsu and start to flow with it a lot better, and it's kind of like they say that like the purple belt is the beginning of the advanced belts. Mm-hmm. So at that time, that was when I really started picking up competition. I wanted to try and like I already explained, I wanted to try and motivate my students, but at the same time I wanted to be able to prove to myself and other people, my peers, that I was actually I was eligible for my next belt. So once I got my brown belt, I wanted to make sure that that like there was no if or but about whether I was a black belt or not. I achieved my black belt through my performance. So that was when I really started picking up competition, and I started to kind of like get some success. And so my first competition at brown belt, I competed at the Europeans, and even though I wanted the gold, I didn't win my gold, but I took a silver, which I was really happy with. I was one of the first one of the first people within my my local group, within like the local area, to have achieved that, and it felt amazing. And I liked the success, and I wanted to keep doing that. It was almost like the hunger to kind of like keep achieving, keep winning the medals. So I just kept on kind of like plugging away, going to competitions. Sometimes winning, sometimes losing. And the thing is it's sometimes easy to just look at my achievements and say, oh, you're successful, but I failed many times in the process as well. Picking yourself back up again and going out there and and winning that next medal, and then maybe losing another 2 or 3 competitions, and then going on to winning another one. And slowly I just became more and more addicted to it. I wanted to keep going with it. I just got the taste for it and just kept going with it. And as I started to compete more, we started to attract more and more students who wanted to compete as well, and who had moved to the area that wanted to keep competing, and we started to build a team around us, and slowly we've started to create a really strong team of competitors in our gym.
Cool.
Yeah.
And what advice, very loaded question from my perspective, what advice would you give someone that's new to the sport and wouldn't necessarily think about competing, and not necessarily, they're not doing it for that reason, per se,
100%.
but when there are lots of white belt competitions now,
totally.
What advice would you say to someone like myself, who didn't really get into it to compete, but is now seeing these competitions and thinking, well, I don't know if I'm, one, ready, and two, if I'm going to get much out of it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, whatever you do, you've got to enjoy doing it, without a shadow of a doubt. But then sometimes you've got to put yourself outside your comfort zone as well. I see competition as I feel like it's a necessity. I think everybody needs to compete at least once, just to experience, to see what it's like. Jiu-jitsu isn't just about competition. There's so many other aspects of it, but I think competing is an important part of development and overcoming those fears. So yeah,
give it a go.
Fail.
I think that's so. Yeah, I think that's, and just to touch on what you said previously, is so important, and it's so important for people to understand that failure is part of the process.
Totally.
Really.
Yeah. And I think that will make it easier for people to actually go out there and try it out as well, if they understand that that it's a very plausible thing, and it probably will happen to you, not just once, but many times. Yeah.
In all aspects. I think the more you do in life, the more you're setting yourself up to fail, and the more you can overcome kind of dealing with those failures, the quicker you'll grow and you'll move forward. Really, 100%, I think. If you're shying away from that, you're only sort of letting yourself down, really, aren't you?
Exactly.
You're living within your comfort zone. Which is what we always say, isn't it? And
totally.
There's no growth there.
Sure.
Absolutely awesome. I'm enjoying learning so much about jiu-jitsu and being able to pick your brain. So I guess one of the benefits of having a podcast. Taking the sport of jiu-jitsu and kind of your way of doing things and your thoughts, what's the what do you think the synergies are with wider health and movement benefits of kind of what's good and healthy?
Okay, so jiu-jitsu is a ground-based grappling art. It's quite low impact. Obviously sparring, there are risks of getting injured, but like one thing I love about training jiu-jitsu is you get to train your whole body. You literally are moving your whole body. And another benefit to training jiu-jitsu and sparring in particular is the fact that you have somebody's body weight that's constantly moving on top of you or underneath you. You don't know what to expect, and the workout that you get and the movements that you do in training jiu-jitsu, I feel like is kind of incomparable to anything that you could do at the gym. It's like I say, it's literally a constant moving weight that you have to shift and pull and push, or you're pushing away, or you're trying to wrestle with, essentially. So I think there's lots of benefits. Is that what you were looking for?
Absolutely. I just wanted your take on it, really, because I've got my own view, which is 100% aligned to what you just said. I think and if you break it down even further, that the sort of it combines. You need a really strong base, strong foundation in all the different aspects of kind of fitness and health and movement. I believe so. You can't be too tight through your hips, and you do loads of kind of hip openers and that sort of thing. And we know we carry so much stress around in our hips. So just for me personally, just training jiu-jitsu has opened my eyes to how inflexible I am, and areas that I need to work on in terms of my hip flexibility and those sort of movements as well. And I think exactly what you're saying about it's lots of different things happening at the same time, lots of challenges, lots of kind of mild stressors for your body, which we know are good, and you're having to cope with lots of different planes of movement as well.
It's very reactive as well.
And that coupled with like you say, you using your brain. So there's such a direct connection with what's going on.
100%.
You can't afford to where you might that classic example of going down to the gym and having like maybe a HIIT workout or something like that. It might be you're only moving in one plane, on a repetitive movement in one plane, and you're not really focusing on that movement because you're just trying to get a sweat on, trying to get a workout. It's completely different to that. And I think because of that, there are huge benefits. You've got all the planes of movement happening. Different sides of the body are working at different intensities, and and you need a real kind of a well-rounded physical movement ability to do well at it, and it kind of all the sort of shoulder movements and that sort of thing, and that it's phenomenal from that perspective. And I don't think I don't think there's another thing, certainly not anything I've done, where you have to do as much kind of thinking staying in the moment, and also requires flexibility and strength in equal kind of. Definitely.
And obviously we're all we're all different, and we all have different kind of like attributes. So some are stronger, like you say, some are more flexible, some can think quicker. So you've got it's almost kind of like finding that balance between those different ones, and also understanding what qualities you have and how you can use that in your favor as well. So just using pure strength alone, athleticism alone is not enough. You need to be able to mix that with an element of flexibility, an element of kind of like understanding the technique, using your head, like you say, like that human chess, essentially. And the same thing goes for the other aspect. You can't just be flexible and no technique, because if you don't have that strength, then you're going to lose on that side of the game. So it is literally just a balance of those those different aspects.
And that's what I think's lovely about it, really. It just pulls all those components in together, and I think, I don't know what your view is. I think that's part of the reason that it's so popular now as well. I mean, do you have a view on the kind of explosion in the jiu-jitsu space, and how that's happening, why that's happening? What's your view on that?
Yeah, definitely. I just feel like that everybody can connect with it in some shape or form. There's two different aspects to training jiu-jitsu as well. You've got the gi and the no gi, and like you tend to find that a lot of people who are quite physical, quite athletic, tend to gravitate more towards the no gi element of it. But I think they could still benefit from training in the gi. The gi allows you to think more. It's more controlling. There's more grips. There's more techniques involved. So I definitely feel like that there's something that everybody could benefit. Like everybody has an attribute that they could actually like use jiu-jitsu as a way of being able to develop some kind of skill. So
not only are they going to build areas, focus on their weaknesses and build those weaknesses up, but also there's something they can tap into to actually improve their performance and help them.
Definitely.
That's interesting. That is interesting. Yeah, cool. So the wider, now I get the feeling from speaking to you and knowing you now, and that you're very, very focused on the jiu-jitsu space and everything in that sphere, which is awesome. But do you have a view of what's going on in kind of the wider health and fitness space, and is there anything that you see outside of your sphere of influence that kind of annoys you, pisses you off, and you think, well, that's different, and I'm glad I'm not part of that?
Honestly, no, not really. I think there's definitely, I think everybody's got their own goals. Everybody has their own views on these kind of things, and I think it's important to be able to accept everybody's ways of doing things. Not necessarily agreeing with everything, but definitely saying, well, look, if that's what you feel like is the right thing to do, then maybe for you that is the right thing to do. I try not to get myself overly involved in the wider thing because I'm so fixated about jiu-jitsu. So unfortunately, I don't really have too much of a say about that kind of thing.
I think credit to you. So credit to you for being that way, and it's great to hear actually, because I've put myself on a stage now on a platform to kind of polarized views around some aspects to health and fitness that I don't really get on with, and some things that I've been exposed to as well, and it kind of it's very muddied waters, and I think credit to you for having that view and kind of keeping your own entity and staying singly focused on that. I think,
Yeah.
credit to you for that. Cool. So what for someone who doesn't really understand jiu-jitsu or has seen bits of it and doesn't really think it's for them, is there a kind of a process or a belief shift that has to happen for someone to come into a gym and start to engage with that sport?
So I find it's kind of like a Marmite kind of thing, really. Like I've very rarely seen people who've kind of like outwardly dismissed jiu-jitsu and actually come back into it and embraced it. You tend to find that people who like training jiu-jitsu tend to stick to it, and the people who don't enjoy it tend to kind of move away from it and find something else.
Yeah.
Like the people, like very very early on, you can kind of like you can actually see the people who do actually thoroughly enjoy it, and the people who that can actually kind of like carry on training long term.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting because the reason I asked that question is because I think there was a time in my life when I don't think I would have been suited to it.
Had you tried at the time?
No, I did some much more sort of stand-up striker type stuff, which was a bit more the way I would describe it. Sort of in my 20s was a bit more focused in the ego mind,
right.
And I think. I'm not sure I would have got on with something like jiu-jitsu.
Sure.
That from my own journey, there was a level of maturity required to go into an environment where I am a new complete beginner, and learn from the bottom up and not really have a clue what's going on. Even though I might have had a physical background, a successful background in. For me, rugby, and then the military, and other aspects of sports. So to have, I guess. That there has to be there's been a level of kind of evolution to now step into that kind of learning mind, that white belt mind. And before, I always wanted to be good at things as opposed to kind of just. That's why I kind of asked the question is because I think I didn't have the perhaps I had quite a poor mindset around I just want to be good at things and I want to do things that I'm good at. But now I've kind of massively turned that corner and actually I seek out things that I'm intentionally seek out things that I'm not good at and want to be that kind of that beginner and kind of learn from a position of shit, I don't really understand, I don't know what I'm doing, I know it's a weakness.
I suppose that's the one exception to the rule then, maybe that that there are people who maybe like later on mature and they develop and they start to realise that maybe it's okay to not be good at something, and sometimes it's important to to start from a place where you're totally like useless at something in order to improve and get better at it. So I think I'm speaking for personal experience. I think that you've got to have the right frame of mind to be able to do that. But it's invaluable if you can put yourself in that position to do that. I think there's very few people like that as well, though. They are few and far between. For sure.
I don't know, but I think. I think in a way you're probably right because we all tend to gravitate to things we're good at, and I see that a lot in sport and fitness as well, and a lot of the guys that I coach, they'll have only focused on things that they had strength in previously, and that's potentially causes problems, causes imbalances within the body, causes them to carry tension, carry stress and all that sort of stuff, and they're less rounded from a health perspective. That said, and I haven't really thought it through with jiu-jitsu fully, but that said, jiu-jitsu, like we said, is a very rounded sport and has lots of different components in it, and I think that sort of strength and flexibility balance is really lovely.
Definitely.
Perhaps it's relatively unique in that perspective, and being able to combine all those factors, which I think again probably is what led it to be so popular. For sure. Okay, what's next for you in terms of the sport, in terms of what you're trying to create with the gym?
So at the moment we've just moved into our new premises. So we were next door to our new gym for about 7 years. So we've expanded. We've got more space now. We're trying to develop the programs. We're trying to build up the student base. For me personally, I want to try and create some champions.
Yeah,
I'd love to create some like European champions and some world champions one day. But to be honest, the wider goal is to just get more people in and more people training and more people enjoying physical activity. It's not for everybody. But it has something to offer to everybody. So I think it's just a case of getting more people through the door, more people experiencing it, and hopefully for those who enjoy doing it or want to carry on pursuing it, then it's a case of just keeping the doors open for them and getting them to train.
So growing your business and kind of making it more accessible for your population or a wider population. Really, that's cool. That's quite a noble viewpoint to have.
Yeah.
And personally, what you're moving towards in terms of, are you just going to keep competing at the same level, or do you want to take it to the next level? Or?
So I'm getting old. I was actually quite old when I first started competing anyway, so I love it. I don't think I'd ever stop doing it. I think it's finding that balance between the two as well, because it's very, very hard to be a competitor and an instructor at the same time as well. And I think as I'm starting to get a little bit older, my body's slowing down. It's definitely not slowed down, but I feel like it's starting to slow down slowly. I want to keep as active as I can. I want to be able to compete, but I also want to be able to offer as much as I can to the next generation. The new breed, as it were. And I'd love to help to develop the kids program more as well, build that, and also get them out competing more as well. So it's something that we weren't really focusing too much to start with, but it's kind of like the kids kind of competition teams kind of grown naturally as well, and now we've actually got their own competition class that we have every Thursday, and we have like 30 plus kids coming into the competition class alone. And they're out competing different places. This weekend we've got a young lady, Marley, who's out competing over at the British Open, and we've got so many parents who are really supportive and and are supporting the kids through all their competitive endeavours as well. So it's just a case of just being there for them and helping them, but still keeping myself active at the same time. But slightly different balance. Whereas before I was pushing myself a little bit more. I feel like I've kind of like I don't feel like I've achieved everything I could have achieved, but I feel like I've done enough to satisfy my own kind of like demands, and now I want to try and kind of like tip the balance a little bit, tip the scales a little bit, and try and offer a little bit more to the students. Yeah.
So you just raised a question in my mind around age for the sport. Then.
Yeah.
So is there kind of like do you think there's an upper age limit to competition, or?
There's definitely not an upper age limit to competition. Like the great thing about Jiu-Jitsu is because it's so popular now. You have different age divisions all the way up to like Masters 6, which is like 60 plus. Mm-hmm. And we have people competing at every different age level. Like even at our gym, we have a guy who's been training with us for like 9 years now, and he's in his late 50s, and he's competed like at least like 2 or 3 times in the last like couple of years.
That's awesome.
So all the way from like 4-year-olds, 3-4-year-olds. We try not to get the younger kids to compete too much. We want to try and make it fun for them and make sure that they're enjoying what they're doing. But then once they get to juniors, which is like 7-8. Mm-hmm. Then we have the competition classes for them and the options there if they want to do so.
Awesome. Yeah. The question that I ask all my guests on the podcast is what is health? Yousuf, what is health?
Health for me is to be able to carry on doing what you're doing as late on in your life as possible. If you can keep active into your into your old age, then that is my idea of health. Yeah, for sure.
It's a good answer. I think we've had lots of different answers to that question. But I think I couldn't agree more. I think that longevity and trying to stay healthy as you get older is a challenge, and it's one I'm sort of taking head on as well, because I think people you know, I've seen it even in my own parents, really. The kind of it's more the mindset than anything else of, oh, I'm getting old, therefore I should be slowing down.
It's almost accepting it, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And I sort of I want to challenge that and say no. I think and again, going back to the guys that I coach, you know, usually in their 40s, 50s, and they're kind of like, oh, well, I should have a few aches and pains. And I'm like, no, don't start out with that mindset. Start out with a mindset of, I want to be in the best shape of my life now.
How do I fix it?
How do I fix it? How do I get into the best shape of my life now? Not when I was 20, I used to play a bit of football, a bit of rugby, and I was in good shape then. Chances are you probably weren't. You know, your mind's probably playing tricks on you. You're probably drinking too much, and probably you weren't as fit and as nimble as you thought you were. And why is that a reflection of where you are now? And why are you stopping trying to be the best version of yourself today?
Definitely.
And
you often mistake the fact that because you're younger, you can recover quicker, so you think you're fitter as well. But that's generally a mistake that a lot of people make. But yeah, totally. And also mobility. You know, I'm starting to understand now how important it is for me to be able to not only train hard, but also help my body recover as well. It's like, you know, your body's, you know, when your car's due for a service, you take it for a service. You know, your body needs to be serviced constantly as well. And you know, I've started to recognize how important it is for me to do that. Started doing yoga, which I never thought I'd end up doing, and trying to make sure that my body is as well-oiled as possible. So,
I think I think you've got an advantage, because jiu-jitsu, you know, you have to have that flexibility, that movement, and that you've got some incredible patterns that are part of the foundations of the sport that everyone does daily. You know,
warm-up drills,
all that stuff is incredible, and it's stuff that you don't see people doing on their own down the gym, sort of thing.
This is the thing, you often forget it because you see it, you know, you're doing it on a daily basis, and it's so ingrained into you that you expect that's just the normal thing to do. But no, I mean, like you say, I mean, most people kind of just go down the gym, lift weights, and that's it. There's no warm up, there's no stretch down or anything like that. So,
and you know, and that's, you know, I'm always harking on people aren't daily focusing on opening their hips. You know, basic stuff like that. We sit down all day, and we've got that closed hip. Same with the shoulders, same with the back, you know, and it's all stuff that is actually part of what we do every day in jiu-jitsu as a warm-up process.
But the same thing goes for jiu-jitsu as well. You need to understand how to counter that movement as well, because everything in jiu-jitsu is very closed in. You're in a ball, so we still need to stretch off and open ourselves out afterwards. Open up the shoulders, open up the back. So I definitely feel like we could add to that as well, and you know, and definitely add extra kind of like mobility movements and stretches, you know, even in jiu-jitsu.
For sure. Awesome. Right, cool. I probably could sit here for another 2-3 hours and quiz you on all things jiu-jitsu and your philosophy and ethos, which is great. I've done my best to kind of pry out all your kind of gold nuggets and for the audience, and you know, try and sort of build an idea, a picture of who you are, and I just want to acknowledge you for the awesome work that you do and the incredible environment that you've set up down there. And you know, like I said at the start, when I stepped in there, I just thought, wow, what a special place. And you know, there is no egos there. It is very much a family community, whether you've been there for it's your first session or whether you've been there for 10 years. Do you know what I mean? And everyone's super friendly, and so I just want to acknowledge you for that, and also the competition stuff that we haven't really talked about too much, but your huge successes in that arena, and so thank you very much. And I will continue to train more and more, I hope, as I get more and more time to get down there, and maybe
good to hear.
maybe you see me on a competition stage at one point. But
thanks for having me on, Nick.
I'm
really
not sure.
It, man.
Yousuf, where can people find out about you, about the gym, about what you're up to?
Okay, so we've got 2 gyms, one in Brighton and one in Hove. You can find us on the website elementsmartialarts.co.uk, or if you just Google Elements Martial Arts, you'll find all the information about us. And please drop in, come try out a free class. You know, you don't know until you try. So come and say hi to us and try out a class on me.
And it is, it's just a really friendly environment. If you've never tried jiu-jitsu and you've heard some of the hype or some of the buzz, then, you know, I couldn't encourage you enough to go and give it a go, because it is very unique. It's very different to anything I've ever done before, and I've tried lots of different sports in my time. So absolutely. And your Instagram handle?
Instagram handle is I can't remember actually. Is it BJJ Brighton? I think maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
Can I have a quick look?
Yeah, have a look. Have a
quick look. Actually, that's a good point. Actually,
but no, thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah.
And maybe we can do another rerun.
All right, fantastic.
What is it?
The phone's actually turned off, but if you search for Elements Martial Arts Brighton, you'll find us.
It doesn't even know his handle. No worries. Thank you very much. Take care, buddy.
Cheers, Nick. Thanks, mate.
There you have it, the incredible Yousuf Nabi. Thank you very much for coming on. And I think that, guys, I just don't know how you feel, and I would love to get your feedback on that episode, because I just think that the sport of jiu-jitsu is certainly strikes me as really unique. Aspects of mindfulness and sort of psychology, which you don't find in a lot of more sort of mainstream sports, and I think that could be one reason why we've seen this sort of meteoric explosion in the industry, and the sort of the mainstreaming of this jiu-jitsu thing that's happening in the world. And we're seeing sort of people, Kelly Slater and lots of Ashton Kutcher as well getting involved and doing that sort of stuff, and guys like me sort of in their 40s now coming in and giving it a go and getting a lot of value out of that in lots of different ways. So it's really interesting, and I can definitely an advocate of giving it a try and trying something that is very unique, and will for sure get you out of your comfort zone, get you failing, which is for sure a positive thing in this environment, and getting you developing, which I guess is what we're here for, right? We're here for development and growth, and that's how we get the most out of life. So I really hope you enjoyed the episode. As always, guys, please interact with me. I desperately seek your feedback, and kind of want to know what you guys are up to and how you're finding things, and anyone you want me to interview, any kind of questions you've got for me as well. They are coming in, but I'm always curious for more. I'm always curious as to what's going on in the head of my audience. So please interact and engage with me. And if you could actually share it with someone, tell them about it, then we'll grow our audience organically, and we'll get the right sort of people listening and getting value added to their life. Thank you very much, and I shall see you on the next episode.